I'll start out real quick. Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to share real quick before we get into this. In this review or analysis of the season, we're really at the beginning point. Even though the season just ended, it's really the start of the analysis. Over the last 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, I met with 29 different players, about a half an hour or more each, so it was pretty extensive on Saturday and Sunday, and that's really kind of been the start. And now I'm in talking here, but just want to give you an idea of the time frame going into some of these questions.
Okay, go ahead, guys.
Joe, just first off, just what are your takeaways, big picture of this season?
We fell short, of making the playoffs. That's always going to be the first thing that I look at because that's our goal. I felt towards the, All-Star break or so, we were in that. We were very close. We were over 500, I think, by 5 games. We had that kind of promising trip, some real hard play out in the southeast, and we fell a little bit short after that. Weren't able to really sustain that type of record and results. Then I think that was really our turning point as far as the timing of the season. I felt culturally, I think we made some strides with the club. I feel that we, our work ethic was there for the majority of the season. You can't complain about that. And I think, that we were able to put over 450 rookie games into the league this year, that was a plus. And so those are the pluses. What we're going to do now is look and see it's more of, instead of saying negatives, it's more of just some areas that we fall short, that we have to really rise them up to where we can be, start up by being a 95-point team, get in the mix to be back in the playoffs, and then after that level, just move up to the championship level.
Did it feel like you talk about that turning point, and at that point, I think the Sharks were maybe on a 90-point pace or something like that. But did it feel like maybe that because of how many younger players you were playing, and then injuries started happening, obviously with Eric, his forearm surgery, that the bottom was maybe going to fall out in some ways, even with how hard you guys were working, just because maybe didn't have the personnel, the manpower to sustain for 82 games maybe.
Yeah, it's not that we had unrealistic expectations. It was realistic. A lot of things would have had to have happened right. Like we would have had to not have injuries. We would have had to have everybody kind of at their peak, and then go through. I mean, there's a tad of luck in this game with that as well, and we didn't. We had injuries and that affected our depth and showed that if we were a little bit deeper in certain areas, it would have maybe got us over the hump at some of those times. But instead, it kind of held us back a little bit, kept us a little bit short.
And speaking of just sort of the realistic expectations of the team, does that also go toward your assessment of Bob's performance? That he had maybe, like you mentioned, maybe, and there are some ways that at best, when everything breaks right, you have maybe a 95-point team. But obviously, things don't break right in an 82-game season naturally with injuries and whatnot, right? And so does that go into, I guess, your assessment of Bob's work this year?
Yeah, it's much like the players. He did a really admirable job in working hard and culturally, maintaining the room that we had, and he was open to playing all young players. He was very, very involved in that, and we collaborated, and that part worked well, and much like we do with the players and everybody else. Now the process that we're going to go and analyze the season and talk about all players, all staff, myself included. That's part of our review process.
And Bob talked about some of the young players that maybe stood out for him, that emerged as maybe guys that you might be able to rely on next year, more so than in past years. Like guys like Noah Gregor, Balzers, Molash. You mentioned Megna too. Caveat, obviously Megna's not a young player, but he's not as experienced too. Or anybody else kind of stand out for you in that regard? Or do you want to say anything more about the players that I mentioned in terms of their NHL readiness on a playoff caliber team next year?
Well, it's there's a pretty large group of upward trending players, and you can even take that more to include Eklund. You could talk about Brandon Coe. You could talk about others that we have, Tristan Robbins, Weisblatt, Gushkin, along with this group that we have. What I've told all of them is it's hopefully that it's going to be a very hard team to make next year, and they better be ready. And I've told them all. I said, there were some of you guys got in because of COVID. Some of you guys got in just that there were injuries and everything else. But if you come into a fully healthy training camp, all bets are off there. You better be working really hard. I don't know which guys it's going to be. So I was really pleased with a lot of guys, this year. I think. Coming in, being able to see Noah Gregor, get a little bit better here, and going in the right direction, and seeing Scott Reedy come in, Sasha Chmielewski, Thomas Bordeleau. I'm sure I'm going to forget guys along the way. There's a number of guys that's just amongst the forwards, amongst the D. Even seeing a player like Jacob Megna. He's an upward trending player, and a great story. And I'm so happy that people recognize what he brings to a team as well, because anybody that watches the American League certainly saw that, and when he had the opportunity up in the National Hockey League, he was able to show that as well. So just so many players that we have, Jasper Weatherby and others that it's going to be a large group. I don't know who's going to rise to the top out of there, and but I think our level of competition will be a lot heavier at next year's training camp.
Tomas Hertl used the phrase 40 goals, and then Bob used the phrase today, 40 goals. So how do you find 40 goals between now and next year?
I don't think it's all in just saying we do this move or this move and this move, and all of a sudden, bam, it's there. I think it's a bunch of little things. It's a bunch of little areas. Could we have? We all saw the overtimes at the end of the year. So I think if we address those overtimes and are playing all those overtimes we're losing kind of after the break, our mojo in overtimes kind of ended, and if we could have got some more points out of there, that's not necessarily goals within there, but I think maybe doing a few more efficient things, taking a look at it over the summer, which I trust that Bob will do, and his staff and our analytics people and everything else. So look and saying, how can we play a little bit more efficient with what we have, first of all, and then how can we add to it? And we're already adding to it, I think, by playing the young players that we did this year, getting 450 NHL experience games out of there. The young players that we've drafted, we're going to draft in the top 11 this year, as well. I don't know if that player is going to be ready, but again, we're adding to that pool of potential. And then, we're going to have to go out and find some players as well. And I know the next question that'll actually be asked is like that. How do we do it when in this economic system? But I think that's a challenge of most teams right now. And you look at there's a lot of teams right now. There's a team out east that found a really couple of good young players, in a really value area. We have to do that. We have to just find some players in value areas, and they can come in and help provide that.
Joe, Eric Carlson mentioned Saturday how Sharks had a great start to the season, but teams eventually figured out what we were doing, and once that happened, we couldn't recover from that. What do you think he was alluding to there?
I don't know. I don't necessarily think it was that teams figured out. We did adjust throughout the year. We adjusted our system a couple of times, so we did make adjustments. I would say it was just more injuries, depth, hitting the wall at times, and again, the way we were playing even played into that at times when our guys were playing so hard at times going into the All-Star break. I just felt we hit that time, they had nothing left in the tank. I was so glad we had the break at that point. So I think part of it was fatigue, part of it was injuries, and that couples in with, if you have a little bit more depth, maybe you get over those things a little bit easier. So we definitely need to work on that. And like I said, the depth is coming. It's not just identifying the problem, but what's the solution, and that's the depth is coming. We saw a lot of these players even just getting Bordeleau in, knowing that Eklund's going to be back next year, knowing that some of these other young guys will be in, and knowing that we'll probably go out and acquire a few players. So we expect the competition level to be higher, and we expect the depth to be higher.
And then a lot of the changes throughout the season sort of led to just no one line that was consistent, for a few games in a row, let's say. So there was times when the top line was good and sometimes the fourth line was okay. And there were a lot of changes. So how much of that do you think plays into not finding consistency in the game?
It does. I think when every team has injuries, every team had COVID this year. So I think you do have to change your lines around and you have to adjust to it. So part of it is part of life. You have to adjust. The best teams do. I remember some Pittsburgh teams that were just they had 7-8 injuries and they still kind of kept plugging away the way they did. They had kind of interchangeable pieces that came in and played and that's our goal. We want to get to that point with our depth to just be able to take and when guys get injured, plug somebody else in and don't lose much in as far as the production of the line or the consistency. So that's our goal to do it. But right now, again, just addressing depth and getting the experience for some of the younger players and externally filling some needs and maybe just even addressing how we play. It really is a compilation of all those areas.
In the last season, what are you most comfortable with, from goaltending, defense, offense?
That's a good question. I'm really happy that we went out and acquired Capo. It really helped our depth in that area tremendously. So I feel a lot better with our goaltending this year, and I had felt we had made an upgrade anyway over the previous year, but so we're moving in a good direction there. With our D, I think as I had mentioned before, the November COVID surge that we had, and when we had the whole group of guys out, and that's when we plugged in, Magna, we had Milosh went in, Merkley went in, we even had, Hataka in some games, Artie Niezov even had a game this year. We found out that we have some pretty good depth at D, and we have, when players are out injured, obviously you can't replace your Carlsons when they're out or your Ferraros when they're out, but we did find out that we had more depth than perhaps we thought because we just hadn't played the other guys, and when they did, they went in and played well, and we won some hockey games. Forward, I think, is where the focus goes on externally probably looking and getting a few players that can produce and address some depth issues, and that's quite frankly where a lot of our young players are as well. So a lot of the young players we're talking about that we haven't seen yet, most of them are forwards. So that's the area I think you'll see probably the biggest change with.
Yep.
So it's fair to say that one of the change possibly here is that 40 goal, addressing that 40 goal sort of deficit overall.
Yeah, I think absolutely, but it's going to be, again, probably a compilation of a group of little things or medium things than a large thing. A large thing to address 40 goals probably means going out and getting a player that quite frankly, we don't have the room for, or at least at this point, we haven't made the room for. But it's a challenging environment. It is for many teams in that regard. So we're going to have to find a different way of doing it, most likely, and that will probably be just doing more little things or medium type things to find the 40 goals.
Do you have any sort of update on where you're at in the GM search process?
You know what? We talk daily. I talk to Jonathan Becker a lot, and we talk about candidates. We do some vetting. We talk again. We keep looking at the team here too. It's about not necessarily the individuals, but it's also the fit. So we go over the fit and we say like, okay, it's not just we like this individual and what they bring, but in as far as the fit goes, how do they fit within the players that we have and what we're trying to accomplish here and things like that too. So we have talks daily. It's just an ongoing process, and again, when we look at it, we had Dean was here for 12 years and Doug was here for 19 years, and we want to whoever we bring in here, we want to have hopefully the same type of run, managerial run and success that we've had in the past.
Speaking of with Bob, do you have a date when you'd like to be able to say whether or not he and the staff will be coming back? Whether it's your decision or the incoming GM's decision?
I don't have a date. It's all part of the process. Like I said, I talked with 29 players over the last couple of days. I'm going to talk to staff members. We're going to go through. We're going to look at numbers. We're going to look at situations. We're going to try and map out exactly. It's more about next year as opposed to this year, and it's more about where are we going. So the first thing is what do we want to be next year? How are we going to do it? And then the last thing is who. And it's the same with players and staff. So I don't necessarily have a date, but I can tell you we're going to just be here every day working on that process until we're comfortable to the point of this is what we need to do. As far as me or somebody else, right now I'm the general manager. I collaborate with my hockey group here, and I also collaborate with Jonathan Becker and Hasso Plattner in giving them updates on what we're doing, and that's we're going to collectively review this year and talk about it. And if we get to a point that maybe a GM decision is imminent or close, or we feel that they're going to be part of that, and that's something we'll discuss. And so it could go either way. We could make some decision here now when we have the information that we're comfortable with to make a decision one way or the other, or it could be when somebody else comes in.
Can I slightly rephrase that then? I would think in theory that you would not want to bring in a coaching staff, say September 1st. That's too close to the training camp. So is there sort of a idea like that where it's too late, like you don't want to do that in September or August or something like that?
Yeah, I mean there's one thing, like we said, we don't want to limit ourselves by putting a date really on anything. Having said that, is the league year kind of starts when free agency starts. When the playoffs are over, then you have the draft and free agency. So the free agency is what, July 13th. That's when you kind of start everything for next year. Ideally, would you like to have people in place, prior to the draft and free agency? You would, as long as you're comfortable with who's there, and that's kind of where it plays. And so it's always the earlier the better, but provided the person's there that you want. And so that's kind of how the date works, and the same works with the candidates that are out there. That changes all the time. There's going to be openings at general manager. There's going to be openings at coaching and things like that too. And that's a changing process that ebbs and flows throughout the at the end of the season now, ebbs and flows through the playoffs all the way through that date. So we take all that into consideration with all of our decisions.
So Joe, can you share what progress might have been made since the announcement of Doug Wilson to now on that list for the search? Is the closed list now? Is it shortened in any way?
I think we're narrowing down from a wide list. I think it just narrows down every day in just talking about the initial list, and then we're making progress kind of on the initial list. So I guess the wide list is the very wide group of people that you could just write down that you have to take a look at, and it's pretty wide. And then you get down to the first list of candidates that you want to basically formally interview, and we're somewhere kind of between that, and it's. Again, we've already talked about some people on the first list, and that's where we're at. We're not going to get into a lot of details of who we're talking to or exactly where we're at in the process, but it's more towards the front end than the back end.
And what about the criteria? Anything you could share on that? I know initially it was too early for that. You guys now have a fairly firm criteria that you're looking for?
Not really. Again, we're going to have people with all kinds of levels of experience, as Jonathan said. We're going to have people that have been GMs before and have a lot of tenure, and you can almost just kind of plug and play them into a role, and they've kind of done that. And there's going to be others that are very promising, but their experience is a lot less. and I think it's all good. And even the backgrounds, where they come from, that some are going to be experts in salary cap and contracts. Other ones will be experts in scouting and development. Other ones will be players that are just really good hockey minds, and they similar to Doug in that way. Just a really good hockey mind that can get in with players and coaches and dig right in right at the start, and people can kind of do the other roles. We're open to anything and excited about that, actually, of the opportunity. We can. It's what you do in the aggregate, your staff. So if you get a cap and contract person, like we had said before, we'll accentuate that with people in other areas. So, and then again, getting back to the fit, as you talked, the fit is a criteria. We're not trying to keep a narrow path for somebody to come in and this is exactly what we want you to do. All we're saying is that we want to win. That we want to win here. That's it. And there could be a lot of different visions on how to do that. We want somebody that'll recognize that there's some good things going, and some people recognize that these are some things that we need to pick up and have some ideas for doing that. So the one thing I don't think we're looking at is like a scorched earth type scenario to say we're just going to kind of start over and in that regard we're down the path on a lot of things, and there's a lot of good things to build on here.
So adding to that fit, a lot of the players seem to highlight a couple of things about Doug Wilson. One was he was very personable, very family oriented, knew the players well, and the second was this loyalty. And are those sort of the key criterias, or at least possible criterias in the search, or is that something you guys give very high value to as you're searching?
Absolutely. That's been kind of the mantra of our success in San Jose is the loyalty, the kind of family, the culture, team aspect. And if you don't have a team, camaraderie and collaboration, you really don't have much at all. And so we want to maintain that. I believe we still have that as an organization, and whoever's at the helm, that will be a huge part of it. And that's why character's everything as we're talking with people.
So there was like two big themes this year. Everybody's talked about the culture. Everybody's talked about not being enough goals. Obviously, Evander Kane seems relatively connected to both of those things. I'm just wondering, now that it's all gone, or all done, just was not having him here for any games this year a net positive, neutral, or negative?
Well, we determined, when we made the call that it was a net positive. We weren't surprised that he went out and scored. He did that with us. He's a good hockey player. He's an exceptional hockey player. And we had to weigh that at the time that we made the decision not to have him here. So we've already made that. We're not surprised that he went out and performed elsewhere, and we made that call. So in our minds, we looked at that as positive to help out our locker room, and we don't have any regrets on that.
Have you gotten any sort of indication from the league when that situation might be resolved, and if you're going to know in time to, plan cap-wise and all that?
Well, when it'll be resolved, not necessarily. It is in the works. I'm not able to comment on much of that at all. The league will, in the process, it will be tied to this league year, and so we'll be able to operate at some point and have an indication. I don't know when it's going to be done with, but I do know that if there is any type of remedy situation or anything that we're going to be able to do that. So.
Hey Joe, hey, sorry for being late, by the way. But you mentioned going on the GM search, but for years it was pretty simple here as far as the hierarchy goes. It was Hasso, Doug, yourself, and Jim Burke and some other people. But how big do you envision this front office growing a little bit, getting some new voices in here? How do you kind of see as far as the size of the front office? Is that going to grow, do you think?
Yeah, I think it will. We've talked about that. There's many more areas of the game that we actually address. We're not missing out on anything, but could we use a little help in some areas? Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we've talked about that we'll address, in this process. And again, from a person who is kind of doing both roles right now, I certainly will welcome that, and I think just having as Jonathan Becker said, just a bigger presence in San Jose will be a positive. So we're taking a look at that. I feel we are strong in a lot of areas, but as far as the manpower goes and the San Jose presence, we're going to look to increase that.
How challenging has this been for you? You mentioned you're doing 2 jobs here. What's it been like for you these last few months?
Yeah, it's been different. There's times when we've had, say, a Sharks game and a Barracuda game at the same time, and I really need to be at both, and I'm not able to, and that's been the hardest part, just not being able to be at both things, and there's having to make choices of one thing over another. I think I think a lot of staff members all staff members have really stepped up in this. So I think we've kind of covered for each other. But just there's been a few occasions that it'll be nice to have support in the areas and have resolution to this.
How would you assess Erik Karlsson's season?
Well, I think we saw some tremendous games when he was there, and I think he would even tell you he's disappointed that he's hurt, and he wants to work on that. He's got a good group of people along with our group here in San Jose that he works with. He tries to be proactive, to injuries, and when you play that much and you play that hard, you are going to get hurt. And that's just part of things, and you just want to limit that. So I think that's something he takes very seriously and wants to make better in the future. But I think he had some tremendous games with us this year, and noticeable when he was out of the lineup. And so if we had a full season, of him at that level of performance on there is again we're probably a lot closer. So
How concerning is it though that he hasn't played a full season since his last year in Ottawa? I don't think for 4 or 5 years since he's played a full year for various reasons, I'm sure.
yeah.
Is that a concern for you guys?
Yeah, it's something that we have to be aware of, and we need to discuss. And again, we need to try and be proactive with treatments, with training, with things like that. Talking with Erik, maybe even with usage. So there's everything. How can we get the best out of the situation with him? Is it minutes? Is it situations? Is it the training? Nothing or everything should be looked at. So
You mentioned earlier that you don't have the cap space right now necessarily to go after a big name, but just on the front, obviously, you'll find out what happens with the Kane situation and you'll have a better idea. But do you feel like you have the permission, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, from Hasso to possibly buy another player out or do something else to find more cap space, basically?
Well, I think we could pretty much bring any idea to the forefront with a with this is the intended consequence of what we're doing. So if it means that there's going to be a player move and we're gonna get X and Y from moving this player, we always look at trades. We have a history of always looking at trades. In the Jones case, there's a buyout maybe for some room. So there's all kinds of different ways of doing it, and we do look at that constantly. So when I say right, everything's just a moment in time for us, and tomorrow it might be different and we do have a lot of different ideas.
Now, can you speak to free agency situations with Barabanov, Magna? Are both unrestricted? Are they both guys that you want to bring back?
Yeah, they are, and I never really go into the meat of negotiations or anything like that, but I've talked to both parties, and that is something that we've discussed, and on our part, we would like to do something.
And how would you evaluate going into? You have 3 starting goalies now, so how are you looking at figuring that out? What's going to go into the decision you make there this summer?
Well, I'm really glad we have 3 because we've never had 3 healthy at once, and so that's number one. It worked out well for us, is that we're able to have 2 healthy goalies for the second half of the year as Aiden was nursing his injury in that, and there will be a point to where we'll have 3, and I'd rather be definitely in that position than the other way, and I look at it as a position of strength. You really usually just do have 2 goalies, but then you have an asset, then you have a player asset. I don't know which way that's going to go. That's going to be in our analysis of how they're all playing, of maybe a marketplace, if we do a deal or whatever it is. So it's something that we have, but we look at it really as a position of strength. But it is something that we'll have to, it won't be the same way next year. So we'll have to do something between now and then. Exactly what, certainly can't tell you. That'll be part of our discussions.
And with Aiden, there's no concern that he only played, I think, 1 game in the last 3 months, and just off and on with his recovery. There's no concern that this is long term, that anything like that this is something that can even go into next season where he has the same injury, don't know what's going on.
I trust that we'll get to a resolution for that in the summer. It's really, to define it, it's just more of a nagging injury than it is like anything really serious to worry about that goes long term or anything like that. It's just a nagging, puzzling type of thing that he's seen a lot of different specialists. He had an injection last week, and these things that we're just trying various things that a lot of times it's a combination of rest, seeing another specialist, getting an injection, trying a different maybe alternative type treatment, and that's what we're going, and a lot of times it's trial and error, and you hit the one that works, and there you go, you're kind of through that. So we think now it's been frustrating for him, it's been frustrating for us in that regard, but it happens occasionally, but it's nothing that we have really long-term concerns about, or that it's a terrible health situation. It's more of a nagging type of thing.
Well, you mentioned the word puzzling, which but it's not a concern though. I mean, I guess is the puzzle solved to some degree. I don't know. Puzzling seems like
just
a lot of words.
It's something when you look at the injury, you say, well, it's not necessarily terrible injury, but it's just not getting better. So it's more about, as far as not the diagnosis of it, but the treatment that'll get them over the hump. And so and that happens.
You have you're obviously going to have a bunch of new young players coming into the Barracuda next year, but then they were also the worst team in the league this year, and I just wonder what your philosophy is sort of on, like, you're gonna have a young team again next year, but also do you want to add more veteran players to help them win? Does it matter if they win and get into the playoffs?
It absolutely matters, and we've been in the playoffs every year since 2014 in our minor league system, except for the year that we didn't have COVID. So we've or when they didn't have playoffs, but we've been in every year until this year, and we take that very seriously. Winning breeds winning. It is important. I probably cut it too thin with veteran players, because the second we took Magna out, and Jake Middleton had been a part of that in the past, and Milosh, and we took a lot of guys up to the Sharks, which is a good thing for the organization, but it left the Barracuda short on players in one regard, but more importantly short on standard bearing players. Never truly have replaced John McCarthy as a standard bearing forward. Jacob Magna was a great captain for us there. I have to double down on that and just make sure that at all times that we have those type of veteran players that can teach young players. That's going to be even more important as we have the Gushkins and Coes and Weissblatts and Robbins and Bordelos and Eklunds and whoever ends up kind of going through the minor league system, that you have players such as Jacob Magna, John McCarthy, who can show them the way. So we've talked a lot about that. I probably we pulled a lot of players up, but in just building it, I probably cut a little bit too short on having those standard bearing players, veteran type guys.
Does anyone need surgery, Joe?
There's 3 guys that we're looking at potential minor leagues or not minor surgery for, and again, it's just 3 days really after the end, so I still haven't sat down with Ray. He just got his reports and things like that. So I think there's 3 guys. So it's again there's a lot of guys nursing injuries. I think there's 3 guys that we're considering surgery on right now.
Can you
So
say who they are?
not at this point, not until I get a little bit more details from Ray. But if we do have an update, I'll get that to you.
How about the road championships? Can you say at this point who's going? Some of the names.
I think we'll have about upwards of like 10 players that are considered. It'll probably be between 8 and 10. Like I just talked to Shane Doan last night, and he's considering a few guys. So I can't really share that with you because I think he's in the process of seeing if it works on his end, if it works on the players' ends. I've been in touch with USA Hockey, Czech Federation, Swiss Federation, Denmark, Latvia. So I've talked to a lot of the different federations on guys, and my guess is it's going to be 8 to 10 players. And I'll talk with Scott as far as when we reach out and it's confirmed with the federations. I think we'll let you know. But I think in the process, in fairness to them, I'm not going to speculate on what they're doing. But I think there's it's likely that it'll be 8 to 10.
Just checking specifically on Eric, just because he said that he was sort of like, thinking about it a couple of days ago. So is that still at that phase where not sure yet?
Yeah, I think so. In Eric's case, I think it's more Eric will let me know on that one. I haven't talked to the Swedish Federation on that, so he could be one as well on there, but I didn't include that in the 8 to 10.
Sure.
So, and I think a number of our players have. I think as much. We'll probably have 8 to 10 that play, and we'll have a number of guys that probably decide not to for various reasons, for injuries and things like that. So,
shifting gears a little bit, I want to ask you about Mara Ferraro. He's in RFA, obviously. I know you don't want to get into too many particulars, but is there sort of a approach that you guys are looking for with his contract in terms of? I know that he's beloved in our organization. He's obviously alternate captain, just his 3rd year, but obviously too, there's also the realities of cap space and that sort of thing. So, is there maybe you can talk about sort of the approach that you guys maybe are looking for, kind of a bridges deal, short term or more long term? We'd love to, if you can, bring him for a long term and, have him, committed for a long term here.
yeah, we're open to everything, and we need to be in that situation. But you're right. It's like the if you can is part of it, and weighing everything on there. So it's if you don't have a salary cap, you're probably leaning towards doing something maybe longer term on there. But when you have a salary cap, you have to weigh, the costs of everything you do at what term and what the cost is, and he's a valuable guy to us, and we'll just weigh that. I have had discussions with his agent Peter Wallen all the way back, I think, to December, January on there, and I've told him at that point in time I was working on Hurdle's contract, and a lot of times you work on the UFAs first as much as you can. Doesn't mean you don't do the RFA players, but it's a little bit different time frame on that. But we have had discussions, and again, it's just managing the cap and along with just managing our future. So.
Joe, anything you can add for Kevin LeBanc about his situation and his future?
Well, again, and going back to the 40 goals, he's one. I think even I was listening to the earlier press conference today too, and he was one player that we just because he hasn't been here for a while, hadn't been here all year, so we just didn't really talk about as much as we probably should be. Is that he is going to bring that offense. He is going to bring that stability, consistency to lines, and more goals for us. It's not 40 goals. I hope it could be, but I don't think he's going to give 40. But he could really considerably help our offense, and we missed him. So I'm looking forward to him. He's at the point now were we a playoff team? Would he have been, just at the end here? Would we be a little less cautious or treat it a little bit differently? We would probably with the number of guys on here. But when you go in and when you're out of the playoffs, you are a little bit more careful with injuries and things like that too. So in his case, just the extra couple weeks of healing, we felt that was beneficial. But he's close to being 100%, and then he'll train hard all summer and really help our offense next year if he's done what he's done in the past.
What's his ceiling? I mean, there's always hope that he could be a top 6 guy. He's getting paid like a top 6 guy.
Yeah.
What's his ceiling like right now for him? Like, is he's going to be inconsistent. I guess that's a fair way to say it. Assess his career the last couple of years. Where does he need to go, and how would you assess how he's going to help this team going forward? I guess.
Well, I think he can play as a top 6 player at times. I think if you're a well-stocked championship team, he's somewhere in the top 9. And he's a scorer and he's creative and he can. I think he could be a kind of a Swiss offensive Swiss Army knife for us, play in a lot of different situations and just help our collective offense.
And a lot could change between now and then, but if you given much thought to whether or not you or the organization is going to let, say, William Eklund or Tomas Bordalo or anybody else that might get pulled in play in the August World Junior Championships?
Yeah, I think we'll consider it, and if that's an opportunity, we'll talk with them. It's it's kind of the season this year went a little bit longer, so we're already into May. So if Bordalo, say, plays in the World Championships now, then that'll get through May, and then he'll have June to train. July we'll have development camp out here, and then it'll kind of go into World Juniors. So we're going to have to weigh at that point in time. Does it make sense for him to go to World Juniors and play in that tournament, or is it better spent in training? That will be the crux of our decision. Is really what's best for his development, getting ready for the NHL season, and it is for his. It'll be on his end, that decision as well. He's already talked to us about that, and he said this may be something we need to discuss. Because it's a tight summer when you're trying to pack in a World Juniors. You got a World Championships, you got a development camp, you got everything else, and we're just trying to give them the best tools to make the Sharks next year.
I can't remember the last time we talked about Eklund, but what did you think of his year overall this year?
It's funny, and when you talk about analytics and data, we saw some positive things in what he accomplished over there this year. The team wasn't very good. Djurgården struggled, and that really affected him. But he was played in a lot of important situations, and that's what we liked. Again, it's one of the things we liked when we drafted him, that he could be a player to play defensively, an all-zone guy, a first minute, last minute, all-situation type guy, and that's the things that we saw from him. They were kind of a one-line team, and it was some older players on there. So offensively, he wasn't very involved in things. When you saw the guys like that he played with, they weren't offensive driving guys. So within there, we had to look and see what with what he had, were we satisfied with that? We absolutely were. And again, when you look at this league, when we made that decision, I think there was one player this year that played, 18-year-old player that played, and it was Sillinger in Columbus. So again, our decision to do that, it's the league and the history of everything. That's what we followed, and I'm glad he went back. I'm glad he got this year under his belt. But I think he'll come in and grab the experience he had in his 9 games last year, and the experience with Djurgården, and be a better player for it.
Is he playing for the national team there for the Worlds?
I was talking with Johan Garpenloff, and I think he was a consideration. I don't know where it ended up right now. So I think he went and played to help his junior team advance at something on there, and then I think Sweden was considering him, but I don't know what the final resolution is on that.
How big is it for the organization to get back into the playoffs next year? I mean, I know you guys want to win now, but is there some more urgency now? Just because you don't want to, the Bay Area being what it is as far as, competition for the sports dollar. You saw what the attendance as well as like at times this year. Just from an organization standpoint, how important is it to make the playoffs next year?
It's huge. I mean, it's if you ask a number of players, it's demanded. You know, like Logan, it's doesn't want anything less than that. Tomas doesn't want anything less than that. They believe we can. Part of Tomas's decision to stay with the Sharks as well, and Bernsey and Eric and Timo and the guys that have had that. The beauty is that as we're getting better and getting some of these young guys in there, they are surrounded with players that have a large depth of playoff experience. So it's really going to help, as opposed to sometimes you have teams that when their young core kind of come up, the other players in the organization really they don't have much experience in playoffs. We do. And so I guess when you've been to something so much, when you've had 30 playoff rounds in 20 years, and of which a lot of our core have been a part of, they demand it. They're that's in their sights, and that's all they want.
We were talking with Brent on Friday, and he was asked, "Do you want to stick it out here or chase a cup elsewhere?" And he loves San Jose. His family loves San Jose, but he also admitted that it was getting up there,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only so many years left. And are you concerned, or is there any concern that maybe some of these players would come to you and say, or whoever the manager might be in the fall, and say, I'd like to chase a cup elsewhere if this team isn't ready to do that right now? Is that something that's maybe crossed your mind, or is that something that maybe has been talked about at all? Or?
Yeah, I think that happens in this business, but we haven't. We've never went out and said that we're not. Our desire is not to make the playoffs or to take a step back. Our desire is to make the playoffs. Not just desire, like our mandate is to do that. So we have that there. Players have choices, and players have thoughts and prerogatives on where they are in their career. So I talked fascinating discussions with 29 players over the last few days, and everything's brought up. I say no holds barred. Like what do you want to talk about? They'll talk. They'll ask about certain prospects they don't know. They'll ask where we're at. What do you think? What do we? What are we gonna do next year? How are we gonna get back into the playoffs? I share as much as I can with them, and I think we have a group that believes in the path that we're going, and is sticking with it. So, but they all do have the prerogative. People have different family situations or different points in their career. Looking at that now, I'm super happy for Jumbo just to be in the playoffs right now and to do that too. So I mean, it's we wish the best for all of our guys.
We were talking to Mark-Edouard too, and I asked him, flat out, are you concerned about buyout? And one of the reasons that's been come up is because now you guys have a lot of other left shot defensemen sort of in the system now who are kind of ready, maybe, to sort of take on a role with this team. Would that play into your decision making as far as that, or this team's decision making? If you're looking to create some cap space, that you have to look for areas where you're deep that you can maybe use that, or something like you said before, take one area where you're deep and use it to address another area, I guess.
I'm very bullish on Mark-Edouard, so that's a hard one for me. He, his ability, the things that he does, ability to shut down top players, and just a few years ago he was in the Norris voting and everything else on there, and I remember how much he's helped other players and shutting down the Sidney Crosbys over the years and different players, the high-end players that he's defended. I'm a big believer in him. I'm not going to get into anything about his future with that, except to say that I'm a big believer in him. And as far as if you're just talking about the use of buyouts, we always do look at it, but you look at our history, we haven't done that all that much. We did that with Martin Jones, and that's kind of a last option for us in most cases. We hope to get the best out of people and go from there.
With the Jones buyout, does that more or less prevent other moves along that line, or just because you don't want to carry that much dead cap space, I guess.
Yeah, no, not really, because it was, if you look in the aggregate of this year, during the year, Aiden Hill plus James Reimer plus Jones's buyout was less than Jones and Dubnyk, and so we had an upgrade, and yet our cap was less. So, that's the type of analysis we look at when we do things like that. Can you, in the aggregate, maybe end up better on things? So, of course, that would be looked at in all situations, but I'm certainly not going to tie that to any particular player here. My view of every player here is that they are here and that they're contributing.
Zeroing in on Mark-Edouard, last 2 seasons though, he's been basically used as a third pairing defenseman, and you mentioned your optimism about him, but obviously with his advancing age and his usage being lowered, I guess what gives you the optimism that he can return to that? I guess when you're saying you're bullish about him, I assume you're talking about him fulfilling close to the value of $7 million defenseman, which is not bottom pairing or third pairing usage defenseman. So how do you see him going back to that?
It starts with his enthusiasm. I had a great meeting with him. He's excited about playing. There's he's got a nice contract. He's accomplished a lot in his career. There's certain guys that'll be, you can tell they're just down the path and happy to be here and different that. He wants to be excellent. He's excited about training. He's excited about coming back. I felt he played very well in the second half, and we saw a better second half. So I had a really good meeting with him. So just for that, the eye test of the second half, that's what I base.
Do you think the second half that he was playing at a middle pairing, top pairing level?
Yeah, he can be. He could still play against top players. So
Joe, with Burns and Carlson, is that pretty much limits Vlasic being on the third line?
Sometimes it does, and if you're looking for specific partners for Burns and Carlson on there, sometimes it makes it a little bit different, and whereas it's not the same as when we had, say, Martin with Burns and we had Vlasic with Braun. I mean, that's what we remember that back from the finals, and then after that, and our defense has evolved, and sometimes we split it up over into 3 pairings and things like that too. And I think I would say our defense is evolving, not necessarily evolved. It's still a work in progress because we have younger players in there, and so with that, he's been moved around a little bit too, and that's part of what's changed with him and maybe changed his circumstance. But it's something we're gonna look at this summer.
What about his ice time? Obviously, Burns is getting a lot of ice time, and so is the second line. And over the last couple of years, Vlasic's ice time is a lot lower. And what does he need to do to change that?
Well, it's not always what he needs to do. I mean, you have a Ferraro plays a lot of minutes, and Burns and Carlson do play a lot of minutes. So it's not necessarily what he needs to do on there. Is just that the situation has changed, and we have to look at how we're going to manage that and who's going to play with who and how that all fits together. And like I said, it's different than when we had all those years when he was playing with Braun and he was he's a shutdown pairing. We're just built a little bit different here now than we were then, and maybe part of it is the adjustment with there. And yes, he is getting older in that regard, but there's plenty of other contributing players his age in the league, and his commitment to training and his just desire to remain a top player. They're all positive signs.
And also a follow-up on Eklund. So when he was here, how much of that decision, you mentioned the age in the league and so on, how much of that decision was based on how he did in those 9 games? And at what point did you guys feel that it's better for him to go back versus stay?
It was much more based on the history of what the league has done over all the years with 18-year-old players, and that just not wanting them. There's been a really a propensity to injury for 18-year-old players in this league. We didn't want them to get hurt. We didn't want to have a bad experience, hit a wall during the year, and then he's just kind of stuck. We'd rather have just a momentum, of what most 18-year-olds do is just go back to their amateur teams and. Or in his case, his professional team in Sweden, but play, let your body grow a little bit, get the experience of that of training camp and those 10 games, and mentally and physically get prepared for the next season. So again, there was just one team that kept 18-year-old player here this year in Columbus, and that just tells you something. It's every team really scrutinizes that decision, and I'm glad we did it.
You're saying no amount of performance was going to change that.
I won't say no amount of performance. It's that could, but that would weigh on him at that point in time. He'd not only have to show us, wow, he's just a top guy at that point, but also that he's not going to get hurt, and or not going to hit a wall. Because again, even in those 10 games, if he doubled his output offensively on there too, we have to consider what's going to happen after 40 or 50, because he's not used to that. He's not used to the travel, and he's not used to playing against speedy 200-pound players that hit for a living, and when your body's still growing and you're trying to figure out the game and do so many other things, it's just again, I overuse this term, but miles on the odometer. You just want to build up as much as we can with these guys, but realistically.
Speaking of contracts, do you think is the goal still the same? At least under Doug, there were a lot of 8-year contracts, a lot of long-term contracts. How do you feel about that sort of going forward?
I think the NHL is a marketplace. You can do what you want to do within your own structure, but unrestricted free agents, it's an open marketplace. So 8-year contracts are given out. They're given out to usually the best players in the game. It's not unusual, and I think in a time too when the cap has been so tight as far as the it stayed at the 81.5 for 3 years. It probably just means that it's going to be more term instead of more dollars, and so you're seeing probably a few more 8-year contracts out there right now. We take it seriously. It's not an automatic for us, but it's also a recognition that there's a lot of them in the marketplace, and when you're battling with other teams for a player's services, that's a big part of it.
How would you assess Roy Sommer and the staff those guys did this year? He was pretty open that it was a real challenging year for him down there.
Yep.
Just how would you assess the job he did this year? Are you anticipating that staff will be back next year?
You know what? At times they didn't have an awful lot of help as far as the players that they had. Like I addressed we taking away Jacob Magna and without Jake Middleton and Malash and different standard-bearing players there, just they could have used a few more vets in there. We yanked an awful lot of players up. That's what we're supposed to do. We'll never apologize for that. But he ended up with a lot of ECHL players in there, and we had again we really had to get deep into goaltending and some different things like that. So it was. I think if you ask Roy, he would say, it's a combination of things. It got pretty thin at times, and he would go back and he's a professional, and he'll look and say, maybe we could have addressed this or that a little bit different. But overall, great human being. They're great hockey men there. They work hard, and I appreciate the job that they do. And like everything else, like every member of this organization, the review is on, and like it should be. We all want to get back to the playoffs, and we all want to be part of a plan that's going to get us there.
We were talking with Bob this morning. He was saying that he'd like to see this team and maybe they should probably share that with you too, about the team getting faster. You know, maybe not just foot speed, but guys who can think the game fast, quickly. How much of a priority is that for you guys this offseason?
Oh, it is, and I think, you know, in fairness, we have some of that, you know, coming. So as far as our internals and some of our players that haven't really seen yet, and you even saw when Bortolo came in, it's not even necessarily foot speed with him; it's puck speed, and you know, he just plays fast, and you know, Eklund will play fast, and Brendico is fast and plays fast and things like that. So some of the prospects we have coming are that, and that'll be part of it. Like everything, it'll be. We look at, you know, maybe we need some more right shots. Maybe we need, you know, some more size in this. We put together an age grid each year. We say, okay, how are we stacked at every position? As far as age goes, we look at an asset grid, you know, like as far as how many skaters do we have, how many, you know, of their skating grades, and so just how that goes, and we see where we're probably leveraged well and where we're not leveraged well on particular things, where we have right shots, left shots, where we have, you know, size, small size, you know, type of things on there, and we look at those points on there. So yeah, speed, you know, is everything here. But again, Noah Gregor and the other night, I think Noah Gregor had Lane Peterson was flying out there. There's some good skaters in the lineup the other night, but if that's a tiebreaker, we always will go with the faster player.
We're coming up on an hour here.
Joe, what are your thoughts on Logan Couture as the captain of this past year?
I think he's been a great captain. He's nobody cares more than Logan. You know, I think you want a captain to be I think if you look back at the playoffs in the past decade in the National Hockey League, Logan Couture would be a top 10 forward for me in what he's accomplished in the playoffs and what he brings, and that tells me that he steps up in the best games. He's a quieter leader because he's very professional. He doesn't, you know, it's more by his actions, by the standards he has. He's a tremendous leader, and we're lucky to have him.